Marcus sat in the back pew of the small country church. His eyes focused on the worn hymnals in the rack in front of him. His fingers lightly traced the edges of the old wooden seat, feeling the rough grain, the splinters of years gone by. He couldn't remember the last time he had stepped foot in a church. It had been years. Decades, really, since he'd known a time when faith felt tangible and real. His life, it seemed, had become a series of small, colorless moments, one after another. The air was thick with the scent of incense mixed with a faint trace of old wood and dust. The stained glass windows above caught the weak afternoon light, casting fractured colors across the walls. The hum of the congregation's voices, joined in harmony, was comforting but alien to him. His mind was somewhere else, far from the words of the hymn. He could hear the preacher, Pastor Elaine, in the background, but his thoughts were too loud, too overwhelming to focus on anything else.
Why am I here?
The question echoed in his mind. He wasn't sure if he was seeking anything, or if he was just trying to escape his own thoughts. After everything that had happened, losing his job, his marriage crumbling, the loneliness that had followed, there was nothing to pray for, nothing to hold on to. God had felt distant for a long time. Faith had felt like a luxury for people whose lives weren't falling apart at the seams. Suddenly, Pastor Elaine's voice broke through his thoughts, clear and direct. She was standing at the front, eyes scanning the congregation. Her words were simple, but they hit Marcus like a stone dropped into still water.
Sometimes we don't even know what to pray for. But God hears the prayers we can't say out loud.
The words landed in his chest, as if they had been meant just for him. The silence that followed felt oppressive, as if the entire room was waiting for him to respond. For a brief moment, the room seemed to spin. He didn't even know how to pray anymore. What could he ask for? A better job? Reconciliation with his wife? Something to fill the hole in his soul? It all felt too messy, too broken to put into words. But the question,
"Are you still there, God?"
came out of nowhere like a whispered cry, unspoken but loud enough for him to hear in his own heart.
I walked through shadows I made on my own, chased after silence, ran far from home. The life I built was breaking inside. I prayed for healing but only heard time. But somewhere in the quiet you were waiting still. Now with thunder, just a whisper soft and real. You answered, not with what I thought.
He wanted to believe in a God who heard him, who cared, but doubt tangled with that hope. What had he ever done to deserve an answer? The altar call was approaching, and people started to stand, some with quiet, hopeful expressions, others with tears already streaking their faces. Marcus didn't move. He stayed where he was, frozen, as if some invisible force held him in place. His eyes were glued to the floor, to the simple pattern of the carpet beneath him. His throat was tight. He wanted to speak but couldn't. The heaviness inside him was too much. He tried to pray. He tried to say the words aloud.
"God, if you're real, if you're still there, can you show me?"
But no sound came. His heart pounded against his chest, and his hands gripped the pew so tightly that his knuckles turned white. A distant memory flashed in his mind. Years ago, when he had first married Leah. They had been so full of faith back then, praying together, holding hands in church, asking God for guidance. But life had a way of shifting, and with each shift, faith had slipped further away from them both. He thought back to the time when their prayers had felt so natural, so alive. What had changed? The moment passed in silence, and Marcus wasn't sure how long he had been sitting there, battling the turmoil inside. The congregation began to rise from their seats as the final hymn played softly. Still Marcus stayed in place. His eyes fixed on the altar, on the small cross in the front of the church, but he saw it through a haze. He wasn't sure if it was his tears or the dust in the air, but everything felt blurry. Then, as the hymn reached its crescendo, something shifted. His thoughts quieted for just a moment, as if the weight of the world had momentarily lifted. He wasn't sure how it happened, but there, in that quiet instant, a sense of peace touched him. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but it was real. It felt like the beginning of something, though he wasn't sure what. As he stood up and walked out of the church, the weight didn't entirely lift. But there was a sliver of hope, a small, flickering flame that had been rekindled. Marcus didn't know how to explain it, but he felt different than when he had walked in. There was still a storm raging inside of him, but now it seemed like the storm had a way out, or at least a way through. He paused just outside the church doors and looked up at the sky. The evening sun had already started to dip below the horizon, but its light was still warm, wrapping the world in soft gold. For the first time in a long while, Marcus allowed himself to breathe deeply. It wasn't the answer he had hoped for. It wasn't a moment of clarity or a grand revelation. But it was enough. For the first time in a long while, Marcus prayed something simple, though it was more of a whisper than a shout.
Thank you, God, for listening.
The phone rang. Marcus looked at the screen, his thumb hovering over the green accept button, but he hesitated. The number was unfamiliar. It wasn't a call he had been expecting, and the last thing he felt like doing was talking to anyone. After a moment, his curiosity got the better of him. Maybe it was the endless silence of his apartment, or the vague sense that he was running out of distractions. He answered the call.
Hello?
Marcus said, his voice hoarse from days of barely speaking to anyone. The voice on the other end was familiar, but it took a moment for Marcus to place it.
Marcus, man! It's Andre!
Andre. The name alone stirred up memories. Old memories from college, days spent with a wild, free-spirited group of friends, trying to figure out life, parties, classes, the occasional late-night prayer sessions. Andre had been one of those people who believed in things with an intensity that had both drawn Marcus in and also made him uncomfortable at times. They'd lost touch after graduation, as people do, but somehow Andre had always stayed hopeful, always reaching out to the broken and the hurting.
Hey, Andre.
Marcus said, trying to sound casual, though the weight of the past few years felt heavy in his voice. He wasn't in the mood for a long conversation.
What's up?
There was a pause. Marcus could almost feel Andre on the other end of the line, the way his energy always seemed to fill a room, even through the phone.
I heard you were back in town, man. I'm actually glad you picked up. I've been praying about this, and I think God's got something for you here.
Marcus frowned, shifting uncomfortably on the couch. He didn't want to hear about God's plans right now. It felt too much like a reminder of everything he had lost, the faith he had once carried, the life he had once been so sure of. But Andre wasn't one to shy away from diving right in. He had always had a knack for seeing potential in people, even when they couldn't see it in themselves.
Look, I'm doing this youth mentorship program for boys in the community. We've got kids here, man, who need someone to believe in them. I've been thinking about you, and I know you've got something to offer. We're struggling right now, and I could really use your help. Can you come by and just meet some of the kids?
Marcus felt a knot tighten in his chest. He didn't know what it was, but there was a strange mixture of guilt and reluctance flooding through him. He had no interest in helping anyone. His own life felt like it was falling apart. He wasn't even sure who he was anymore. How could he help anyone when he couldn't even help himself?
Look, Andre.
Marcus said, his voice suddenly guarded.
I'm not sure if this is the right time for me. I've got my own things I'm dealing with right now. I'm not sure I'm cut out for that kind of thing anymore.
There was silence on the other end, and then Andre spoke, his tone softer, but with that same urgency Marcus had always known.
Marcus, I get it. I really do. But I'm not asking you to have all the answers. Honestly, man, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I just need you to show up. I just need you to be here, to sit with these kids, listen to them, and help them understand their worth. You don't have to have it all together. Trust me, I don't either. But God uses broken things to make something beautiful. Maybe you're one of those broken things right now. But I know you're not too far gone for God to use.
Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He didn't know how to respond. There was a tightness in his chest, like something had just cracked open. Andre's words hit him in a way he wasn't prepared for. There was no pretension, no judgment. Just a raw, real invitation.
All right,
Marcus finally said. His voice barely above a whisper.
I'll come by tomorrow. But I can't promise anything.
You don't have to promise anything, man. Just come, that's all I'm asking. I'll see you tomorrow.
You got kids, Mr. Marcus?
No.
Marcus replied, his voice flat.
No kids.
He paused, then added.
Not anymore.
Tyrell raised an eyebrow, sensing something beneath the surface. The other boys in the room fell quiet, waiting for Marcus to say something more. But he couldn't. He didn't know how to explain the emptiness he felt inside, the hollow place where his family had once been. Instead, he shifted in his chair, trying to change the subject. But Tyrell wasn't done.
You look like you got a lot on your mind. I mean, we all do.
There it was, the unspoken truth. These boys, despite their circumstances, despite their rough exteriors, could see things Marcus hadn't been willing to face about himself. For the first time in a long time, he felt like they understood something he hadn't yet processed. The tension in the room softened, and Marcus found himself leaning forward, sharing a little more than he intended. He told them about his job loss, about his divorce, about how he didn't know what he was doing anymore. In return, Tyrell opened up, telling Marcus about his own struggles. His father in prison, his mother working 2 jobs just to make ends meet, the dream he had of going to college someday. It wasn't much, but it was enough. By the time Marcus left the community center that evening, the weight of the day's conversation lingered. His heart was heavy, but there was a spark of something, hope maybe. He didn't feel like he was just going through the motions anymore. The awkward, difficult moments had connected him to something deeper. He couldn't explain it, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was meant to be there. Not for some grand, noble reason. Not because he had it all together. But because sometimes, just showing up was the most important thing. The days that followed Marcus's first visit to the community center were a blur of new experiences. At first, he came only out of a sense of obligation to Andre, unsure of what he was doing there or why these kids needed him. He thought of it like a form of penance, showing up, being present, without the expectation of anything more. But as the weeks passed, he began to notice small changes in himself. His heart, once hardened by the constant weight of disappointment, began to soften. It wasn't just about the kids anymore. It was about him too. About reconnecting with something he thought he had lost. The belief that his life could matter, that he could make a difference, even in small ways. One particularly cold morning in early November, Marcus stood outside the community center, waiting for the doors to open. His breath formed little clouds in the air. He had come to dread the drive here, the long stretch of highway that felt like a reminder of everything he'd walked away from. The city, his old life, his wife, his career. All of it felt distant now, like a story that had been written and closed long ago. But here, in this neighborhood, he had a different kind of connection. He had found purpose, not in grand success, but in the small, sometimes painful moments of real human connection. Inside, things were busier than usual. The kids were gathered for an event, a career fair. Tyrell, the young man who had opened up to Marcus months ago, had asked if Marcus could help him practice for an upcoming job interview. In that moment, Marcus had no idea how he was supposed to help. He wasn't an expert, he had no qualifications, and certainly no reason to be giving career advice. But the look in Tyrell's eyes, the way he trusted Marcus despite his uncertainty, struck something deep inside him.
Mr. Marcus, you said you knew about this stuff?
Tyrell had said, eyes hopeful, voice carrying the weight of expectation.
Can you help me? I gotta get this job, man.
Marcus hesitated, his mind racing. Was this really the right thing to do? The self-doubt still lingered like an old friend, reminding him of all the failures in his life. But then something unexpected happened. The memory of his own first interview, the nervousness and the fear, flashed in his mind. He remembered how hard it was to trust himself back then, how much he had wanted someone to help, to guide him through it. Without realizing it, he smiled at Tyrell.
All right, let's work on it. We'll start with the basics.
As they sat across from each other, working through mock questions and answers, Marcus was struck by Tyrell's raw honesty. The boy wasn't just asking for help with an interview. He was sharing his own fears, his hopes, and the pressure he felt to succeed. The weight of being the man of the house at 15 years old, the expectation to make something of himself when everything around him seemed stacked against him. At one point Tyrell asked,
What if I mess up?
Marcus's answer came more instinctively than he expected.
Everybody messes up, Tyrell. But that doesn't mean it's the end. It means you try again. You learn, and you keep moving forward.
Tyrell didn't look convinced, but he nodded, absorbing the advice. There was a long silence between them, the kind that felt heavy with unspoken truths. Tyrell was asking Marcus questions that Marcus wasn't ready to answer, not yet. The weeks that followed brought more shifts in Marcus's routine. He had agreed to help the non-profit with some additional programs, mainly career development workshops. They were short on staff and they needed someone with experience. Marcus, though skeptical of his own abilities, jumped in. He felt compelled. It wasn't just about the paycheck. It wasn't even about the sense of purpose he'd begun to feel. It was something more. One night, after a particularly long day of preparing materials for the workshop, Marcus sat in his modest apartment, reflecting on everything that had changed in such a short time. He picked up his phone and began scrolling through emails, ones he had ignored for months. His eyes lingered on an old email from his former boss in Atlanta. The subject read, "We miss you here, Marcus. We have a senior position open. Please consider coming back." Marcus stared at the message. The offer was tempting. It would mean a return to the life he'd once known, the comfortable office, the status, the security. But it also meant a return to a version of himself he had walked away from. The version of Marcus who believed that success could be measured by how much money you made, how many hours you worked, how many deals you closed. His finger hovered over the reply button, but instead he set the phone down. He thought about the conversations he had had with Tyrell, the other kids at the community center. They weren't asking for wealth, status, or fame. They were asking for something more fundamental. Guidance, hope, someone to believe in them. The next day, the non-profit reached out with a proposal. They wanted Marcus to lead a new initiative, a program designed to help young adults transition from high school into their first jobs or higher education. The role was far more significant than Marcus had anticipated. And the salary was surprising. It wasn't corporate pay, but it was enough. Enough to live on. Enough to give him stability without sacrificing his newfound purpose. As he read the email over again, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope mixed with disbelief. He wasn't ready for this, he thought. He wasn't equipped. He had no degree in social work, no experience in career development beyond his own business failures. But then, he remembered something Andre had said to him in their first conversation.
You're perfect for this because you've been through it. Because you understand what it's like to feel lost and to have to rebuild.
Later that week, Marcus met with the nonprofit's leadership team. They were warm, welcoming, and made it clear that they believed in him. They saw something in him that he still struggled to see in himself. The first workshop he led was awkward, to say the least. But by the end of the session, the young adults in the room were asking questions, staying after to talk, seeking his advice. It wasn't just a job anymore, it was a calling. As Marcus left that meeting, he couldn't help but reflect on the years he had spent chasing after success in the wrong ways. He had lived for titles, for positions, for wealth, but none of that had filled him. In this room with these young adults, he felt something different. Fulfillment. As he drove home that evening, the weight of it all pressed in on him. Was this the answer to his prayer? He didn't have all the answers, and he certainly didn't have his life completely together. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt the weight lift, and he realized, maybe this was the door he had been waiting for. The thought struck him with startling clarity. This wasn't just a career move. This was God answering his unspoken prayer, the one he'd never fully understood but had always needed. The weight of the decision was starting to settle in. Marcus had been offered the leadership role in the mentorship program, and he had accepted it, not without hesitation, but with a sense of purpose that felt new, almost foreign to him. But even as he stepped into this new life, his past clung to him like an unshakable shadow. One evening, after a long day at the community center, Marcus found himself walking home through the dimly lit streets of the city. The cool air nipped at his face, but his mind was miles away. It wasn't the kids he'd mentored, or even the job he was about to start. It was Leah. Leah. The name felt like a weight on his chest. It had been over a year since the divorce. Over a year since the day he had left their home in silence, without any words left to say. He had carried that silence with him, every day, every hour since. The emptiness between them had been so thick, so suffocating, that neither of them could breathe in the same space anymore. It hadn't been just the fights. It was the slow, painful erosion of trust, the dreams that had once been shared but had gradually been buried under the weight of disappointment. Their love had been a casualty of their own unresolved hurts, their own mistakes. He passed by a cafe he used to frequent with her, his chest tightening at the memories of her laugh, the way her hand felt in his. They had been so full of hope once. But now, every corner of the city seemed to remind him of what he had lost, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to face that loss yet. He reached his apartment and stood in the doorway, staring at the empty space before him. The silence in the room was like a living thing, wrapping around him, suffocating him. He tried to push it away, but it clung to him, every inch of the apartment a reflection of the life he had tried to build alone. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Message. It was from Andre.
You doing okay, man? I know things have been heavy. Don't forget to lean on God in these moments. He's doing something in you. I can see it.
Marcus stared at the words for a long time, the tightness in his chest growing. Lean on God. Later that night, Marcus found himself sitting in the dark, his back against the couch. The TV was off, but he didn't really notice the silence. His heart felt as empty as the room. For so long, he had convinced himself that all he needed was time to heal, time to fix everything on his own. But now, in the quiet of his apartment, he realized how much he had been running from, how much he had refused to confront. The next morning, he walked into the community center with a heavy heart, his mind still swirling with unresolved emotions. He had agreed to lead a session that day, a career readiness workshop for the older teens. He wasn't in the mood. His mind wasn't in it. But as the session started, something shifted. The teens were rowdy at first, dismissive, some of them checking their phones, others chatting amongst themselves. Marcus stood at the front trying to focus, but the fatigue of the night before seemed to seep into his bones. He couldn't seem to shake the thought of Leah. He kept hearing her voice in his head, the arguments, the words they had both said in frustration. The last time they spoke, when she'd told him that she wasn't sure who he was anymore. But then Tyrell raised his hand.
Mr. Marcus.
He said, his voice quiet.
I'd been thinking about what you said the other day. About how everyone messes up but keeps moving forward.
Marcus nodded, not sure where this was going.
I messed up.
Tyrell continued, his voice thick with emotion.
I've been messing up for a while now, and I don't know how to fix it.
The room went quiet. All eyes were on Tyrell now, and Marcus could see the vulnerability in the young man's face.
What do you mean?
Marcus asked, his own voice softening.
I got a little sister, right? And my mom's been struggling. I don't want to mess up and let them down. I don't want to be like my dad.
Tyrell's words hit Marcus in a way he hadn't expected. They weren't just about Tyrell anymore. The boy's pain mirrored something deep within Marcus. The same fear, the same uncertainty, the same desire to fix things that seemed irreparable. For a moment, Marcus saw himself in Tyrell. He saw the young man who was trying to figure out how to be better, how to move forward despite the mess. After the session ended, Marcus found himself standing outside, the air crisp against his face. Tyrell had stayed behind to talk more about his situation, and the two of them had connected on a deeper level. But as Marcus stood there, a realization began to settle in his heart. He had to confront the mess in his own life. He hadn't wanted to admit it to himself, but he could no longer ignore the wounds that still haunted him, the broken pieces of his marriage, the bitterness that had festered. He had been running, pretending that his work and the kids at the center were enough to fill the void, to avoid facing the things that truly mattered. Later that evening, Marcus found himself standing at the front door of Leah's apartment. He hadn't been here in months. The last time he had seen her, the conversation had been heated, full of words they both regretted. But tonight, he knew he had to face her. He had to confront the past if he ever hoped to move forward. He knocked, and the door opened slowly. Leah stood in the doorway, her face a mixture of surprise and guardedness. She hadn't changed much, still wearing that warm smile that had once been a comfort to him.
"Marcus,"
she said softly, stepping aside.
"what's going on?"
He stood there for a long moment, the words stuck in his throat. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet but full of emotion.
I've been running from everything, Leah. I thought I could fix it all on my own, but I can't. I've been hiding behind my work, behind everything else, and I need to face the things I've been avoiding.
Leah's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long time, there was a flicker of hope in her gaze.
"You are here now. That's something, Marcus."
The two of them sat down, talking for hours, sifting through the rubble of their broken marriage. It wasn't easy. There were still raw moments when old wounds were reopened, but there was also a sense of healing in the air. They weren't ready to fix everything in one conversation, but for the first time they were ready to face it. And that, in itself, was a breakthrough. As Marcus drove home that night, the weight of the conversation lingered. It was a small step, one conversation, but it felt like a breakthrough. He wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving forward. God had answered his prayer, not in the way he had expected, but in a way that was both beautiful and challenging. The healing wasn't going to be immediate, but it had begun. The weeks following his conversation with Leah had been a quiet storm in Marcus's life. He had faced his past, had confronted the mistakes and wounds that had weighed him down for so long, but there was still a deep, unspoken sense of uncertainty. Healing doesn't come all at once, he realized. It's a slow process, sometimes painful, often uncomfortable, but it is progress. He couldn't expect everything to change in an instant. Despite the progress he had made, Marcus was still wrestling with doubt. Could he really make a difference? Was he truly equipped for this new chapter of his life? He spent his days at the community center, working with the teens, focusing on his new role in the mentorship program. But outside of that, there were moments of solitude, quiet times when the shadows of his past crept in, doubts about his worth, his place in the world, the fractured relationship with Leah. One evening, after an especially draining workshop, Marcus sat alone in his office at the center. The kids had gone home, and the building was eerily quiet. He stared at the stack of papers on his desk, career readiness guides, mentorship plans, workshop feedback, and felt an overwhelming sense of emptiness. Was this all enough? His mind wandered back to that day when Andre had first asked him to help out at the center. He thought of the offer he had turned down from his old boss, the one that promised financial security and status, but would have only left him feeling like a hollow shell of the person he once was. He had chosen the unknown, the risky path of service, the one where the rewards weren't measured in paychecks or accolades. But tonight, the weight of that decision seemed heavier than ever. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Andre.
Hey, man. You good? Haven't seen you much this week. You're making a huge difference, you know.
Marcus stared at the words for a long time. Andre was right, of course. He had been making a difference. He had seen the change in Tyrell in the others. They looked up to him, and in turn, Marcus had begun to see the world through their eyes. But still, there was a nagging voice in his head. Was he truly helping them, or was he just pretending to be something he wasn't? He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, the questions swirling around him. And then, for the first time in a long time, a thought whispered in his mind.
God is not finished with you yet.
It wasn't an audible voice, but it was a presence, a quiet reminder, a deep sense of peace that washed over him. He remembered the promise that had been made to him when he first turned his life over to God. The promise that he was not defined by his mistakes, that he was loved despite his flaws, and that he had been chosen for a purpose. Suddenly, the door to his office creaked open. It was Tyrell, his face drawn, his posture stiff with tension.
Mr. Marcus,
He said hesitantly.
can I talk to you for a minute?
Marcus sat up, a mix of concern and curiosity flooding his chest.
Of course, Tyrell. What's going on?
Tyrell walked over to the desk and sat down, not meeting Marcus's eyes.
I don't know how to say this. But I've been messing up again. I've been hanging out with the wrong people, doing things I know I shouldn't be doing. And I'm scared I'm gonna end up just like my dad.
Marcus's heart sank. Tyrell had been doing so well. He had seen such promise in him.
Tyrell, we've talked about this before. You don't have to be defined by your past. You don't have to make the same mistakes as your dad.
Tyrell looked up at him. His eyes filled with a mixture of shame and fear.
But I don't know how to stop. I keep messing up, and I feel like I'm just letting everyone down. I don't want to be like this anymore, but I don't know how to change.
There was a long pause. Marcus sat there, staring at Tyrell, searching for the right words. But instead of giving advice or offering a simple fix, Marcus found himself speaking from a place he hadn't expected. His own brokenness.
Tyrell,
He began, his voice quieter now.
I understand how you feel. I've been there. For so long, I felt like I was too broken to fix. I've made my share of mistakes, big ones. I ran away from everything that mattered. But I learned something that I want to share with you. You don't have to be perfect to be loved by God.
Tyrell looked at him, still uncertain. Marcus continued, the weight of his words filling the room.
You're not alone in this, man. You don't have to fix everything by yourself. God's grace is bigger than your mistakes, and if you're willing to turn to Him, He'll help you take that first step. It's not easy, and it's not always quick. But you don't have to carry this burden by yourself. I'm here to help you, and so is God.
The silence that followed was thick. Tyrell's eyes welled up with tears, and Marcus could see the battle inside him. The desire to change, the shame that held him back, the fear of not being enough.
Do you really think I can change?
Tyrell asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded.
I do. And you don't have to do it alone.
There was something in that moment, something almost sacred. In helping Tyrell, Marcus had found healing for himself. It wasn't just the words he spoke, but the realization that he, too, was a work in progress. He wasn't finished. He didn't have all the answers, and he wasn't perfect. But that was okay. God was working through him, and that was enough. The days that followed were filled with small, quiet victories. Tyrell showed up for his next session with a new resolve. His steps uncertain but determined. Marcus continued to lead the mentorship program, now with a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a mentor, a guide, and, most importantly, a fellow traveler on the journey of faith and redemption. One Sunday morning, months later, Marcus found himself sitting in the church pew, the sunlight filtering through the stained glass windows. The choir sang a familiar hymn, and for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace settle in his heart. He had found his place. It wasn't in the career he once had, or in the image of success he had once chased. It was in these moments of connection, of reconciliation, and of grace. As the service ended, Andre came up to him with a grin on his face.
You did it, man. You've come a long way.
Marcus smiled back, his heart full.
I think I'm just getting started.
You called me when I was sure I had no voice. You showed me love can rise out of the noise. It wasn't easy, it wasn't fast, but you were faithful through all of that. I thought I was lost, but I was found. You answered. I tried to lead from a heart full of doubt, teaching the truth I was figuring out. But in the questions, I saw my pain, and in the healing, I found my name. Every story, every tear became a song. You were writing mercy